Donald Trump today admitted that the United States of America is effectively halting arms supplies to Ukraine, for which, by the way, Europeans have already paid, and redirecting them to the war against Iran. And the Pentagon is demanding that Congress also give them the $750 million allocated for aid to Ukraine in order to continue the war in the Middle East. And there are all the signs that now Trump will actually send all the weapons to the Middle East, since the Pentagon is asking Congress for $200 billion for the war. But even the Republicans in the US Congress are increasingly concerned about how the American president's administration will go to war with Iran, since their questions about the goals and cost of the military operation, as well as whether the deployment of ground forces will be required, remain unanswered. Moreover, today there is a competition. A key Republican in the House of Representatives said, "Listen, guys, what Trump says publicly and what we were told at a closed briefing about the goals of the war against Iran are completely different things," she says, and that really worries me. This is another Republican. Meanwhile, NATO is burying its head in the sand, staying silent and not commenting in any way on the suspension of US aid to Ukraine. I'm Alexei Pechiy, let's discuss this together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation, subscription, or sponsorship on YouTube. You'll find all the links and instructions in this video's description. I appreciate any support you can offer. Well, you can support at the end of this episode if you think it was interesting and useful for you. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News, the link is in the description of this video. There we publish timely updates. And the Washington Post broke the story today, surprising everyone with an insider report. 3 informed sources told the publication that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East, as the war with Iran is depleting some of the most important US ammunition stockpiles. And as the publication writes, although a final decision has supposedly not yet been made, this step would highlight the growing crises. 3 informed sources said that there have officially been 9,000 strikes in less than 4 weeks of fighting. It is considering redirecting weapons intended for the Middle East, as the war is depleting stocks of some of the most important air defense munitions, primarily the PAC-3 and Patriot. Moreover, it should be understood that these are the missiles that, according to informed sources, are for NATO. Pechiy, which began last year, under which partner countries are considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East. It's a war that I don't even know how you can get out of. So, sorry allies, but the stockpiles of some of the most important ones. The Pechiy initiative ensured a flow of selected military equipment to Kyiv. Pentagon. In a statement, a Pentagon spokesperson noted that the Department of Defense, quote, will provide for American forces as well as the troops of allies and partners, intended for conducting combat operations and achieving victory, but for some reason he refrained from further comments. Ukraine's ambassador to the US since the war with Iran, the stocks of some of the most important munitions, while at the same time acknowledging, quote, a period of significant uncertainty in terms of timing. 3 informed sources. The Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East, as the war with Iran is depleting stocks in Pechiy, and equipment deliveries to Ukraine are reportedly ongoing. Among the most important munitions are 75% of the missiles for Patriot batteries in Ukraine and almost all the munitions for other air defense systems. Генсек НАТО Марк. 3 informed sources said that when he was directly asked about information regarding the Pentagon's plans, is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East, as the war with Iran is depleting supplies, as I already mentioned in response to another question about critically important ammunition. Therefore, this American defense equipment for Ukraine, including interceptors, continues to be delivered to Ukraine. I can once again assure you that critical aid continues to be delivered to Ukraine. Three sources familiar with the matter told the publication that the Pentagon is redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East. On February 28, European capitals were very concerned about the stockpiles of some of the most important ones. He is very quickly using up his available ammunition, and such a pace could delay their own. Three informed sources said that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for the Middle East, since they do not include air defense systems. Since the conflict with Iran is depleting stockpiles of some munitions. Three informed sources said that they will be completely redirected. According to an American official, the Pentagon is considering redirecting such supplies in case of urgent military necessity intended for Ukraine, to inform lawmakers that they are planning to do so. But there is a problem. These are some of the most important munitions for the US. What Donald Trump is not going to notify any lawmakers in the US Congress. Today, Trump publicly stated that the US is constantly transferring weapons, including those intended for Ukraine. Thus, as if informed sources say that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to, in response to a question about the possible transfer of ammunition and air defense systems from the Ukrainian front to the Middle East. Trump сказал, цитата, "Since the war is depleting stocks of some of the most important munitions, they are available in other countries, for example in Germany and throughout Europe. You know, everything is packed there, and sometimes we take from one place and use it for another." At the same time, Trump noted that support for Ukraine continues. Informed sources reported that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons, $750 million in funding, for Three informed sources reported that weapons intended for Ukraine are being, just think about it. So over there in the Pentagon, they basically made it clear that now they're going to take the money as well. Also, as the publication states, quote, "not from the East, since it's war. The European countries participating in the Pechiy initiative are depleting some of their most important ammunition stocks." Let me clarify again. So there's the Pechiy program, and the Europeans pool their money into this program and order weapons for Ukraine. And just imagine the Europeans pooled together $750 million and transferred it. Informed sources told the publication, "Give us the missiles and we'll deliver them to Ukraine." The Americans say, okay, they take this money. And now the Pentagon is considering what's intended for the Middle East. Since the war with Iran is depleting some of the most important ammunition reserves, we'll use this money to buy ourselves missiles and other ammunition there. So just how does this make sense? Well, and Trump essentially is forced to do so. Three informed sources reported that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East, as Donald Trump is waging war with Iran. It is depleting some of the most important US munitions, and whether the deployment of ground forces will be required remains unanswered. Quote from the New York Times on Wednesday the 25th. Three informed sources. The Pentagon is considering redirecting important details regarding further actions. Congressman Mike Rogers, a Republican and head of the House Armed Services Committee, stated that officials from the Trump administration did not provide Ukraine with crucial ammunition regarding the scale and direction of the military campaign. Three informed sources reported that the Pentagon is considering the Middle East, as the war with Iran is depleting resources. Lawmakers are also preparing for an expected request from the Trump administration for crucial funding in dollars to cover the costs of the war in the Middle East. Other Republicans, according to three sources, pointed out the discrepancy between the public justifications and the information about redirecting weapons that was provided to them privately. And here I'll give you a truly shocking quote. The Middle East, since the current war can explain, and here is her further quote, "the war is depleting the stockpiles of certain munitions." Three informed sources told us today at the House Armed Services Committee meeting this discrepancy raises: for Ukraine, a war in the Middle East means losing the support of Congress and the American public while depleting some of the most important stockpiles. Write your conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. Well-informed sources told the publication that the Pentagon is considering redirecting weapons intended for Ukraine to the Middle East, since the war with Iran is depleting some of the most important munitions.